welcome to the deep dive.
Hey there!
In this deep dive, we're tackling a stack of sources, mainly focusing on one crucial local government meeting here in Augusta.
That's right, the second meeting of the Augusta Charter Review Committee, which happened back on April 21st, 2025.
Our main source today is the full transcript, actually, from the Augusta, Georgia government YouTube channel. It captures the entire discussion.
So think of this as your shortcut. We're aiming to pull out the key moments, the big decisions, the debates.
Yeah, help you grasp what happened and, importantly, why it matters without you having to wade through, hours of tape.
Exactly. Let's get into it.
Okay, so setting the scene, the meeting kicks off, but they don't have an elected chair yet.
Right. A temporary chair had to step in just to get the ball rolling on nominations for the actual chair position.
And that was the first order of business, getting that leadership sorted.
Yep. Nominations started coming in. We had Lee Powell, nominated by Tanya Barnhill-Turnley, Marcy Wilhelm, Dr. Marv.
And Lonnie Wimberly, nominated by Ms. Cody, I believe.
Correct. Then they explained how the voting would work.
Which is important. How do they set that up?
They decided to vote on nominees in the order they were nominated. And the key thing, you needed a majority, which for this 11-member committee is 6 votes.
6 votes to win the chair position.
Right. And if nobody got 6 in the first round...
They'd open the floor again, new nominations, or even renominating the same people.
And almost predictably, there was a little hiccup with the tech.
The electronic voting clickers? Yeah, sounds about right.
A bit of a pause while IT came in, clarifications on, do you hit yes or no? Do you need to hit send? That kind of thing.
Standard procedure sometimes.
Yeah.
They also made it clear, only 1 vote per nominee in each round.
Got it sorted. So, on to the actual voting. Round 1 for chair. First up, Lee Powell.
And that vote failed. It was a 5-5 tie.
Ooh, close.
Oh.
Then Marcy Wilhelm.
Also failed. 4 votes yes, 6 votes no.
Okay, next, Dr. McCord.
Same result. Failed 4-6.
Wow. And the last of the initial nominees, Lonnie Wimberly.
That one failed too, 3-7. So nobody got the 6 votes needed.
Deadlocked after round 1, which meant...
Back to nominations. The floor opens up again.
And we saw some familiar names pop back up, plus a couple new ones. Marcy Wilhelm was renominated, this time by Mr. Fuchs. Dr. McCord was renominated.
Then Ms. Turnley was nominated by Ms. Will Henley. Angela Boss was nominated. And Lee Powell was renominated as well. Quite a few options now.
So round 2 begins. First vote is for Marcy Wilhelm, who was just renominated.
And this time, it carried 6-4.
Ah, so the deadlock was broken.
Exactly. With that 6-4 vote, Marcy Wilhelm was officially elected the new chairperson.
Okay, great. Leadership's starting to take shape.
But before handing over the gavel, they decided, let's finish electing the other officers, vice chair and secretary.
Makes sense. Get the whole team in place. So, nominations for vice chair.
Dr. McCord nominated Angela Baucus. Mr. Steve Fuchs nominated Lee Powell. And Ms. Tanya Barnhill-Turnley actually nominated herself.
Interesting. Okay, so voting for vice chair, Angela Baucus first.
That failed. Another 5-5 tie.
Wow, these ties. Okay, Lee Powell next.
Also failed, 3-7.
So that left Tanya Barnhill-Turnley.
And her vote carried, 6-4. So Miss Tanya Barnhill-Turnley elected vice chair.
All right, so chair and vice chair sorted. What about secretary?
Initially, no nominations. Then Ms. Baucus was nominated. Seemed like maybe a reference to her handling some logistics, but she was nominated.
And any other nominations?
Nope. So the vote for Ms. Baucus as secretary.
Unanimous.
Exactly. Ms. Angela Baucus elected secretary.
So the leadership team is set. Chair Marcy Wilhelm, Vice Chair Tanya Barnhill-Turnley, Secretary Angela Baucus.
And with that, the temporary chair's job was done. The meeting was officially turned over to the new chair, Ms. Wilhelm.
Okay, so leadership's in place. What's next on the agenda? A pretty big one, right?
Yeah, immediately moving on to discussing and approving the committee's own rules, the bylaws. About 4 or 5 pages of proposed rules.
The chair opened it up for questions first, then comments. Smart way to handle it.
And right away, a couple of key procedural points came up. First, quorum.
How many people need to be there to even have a meeting?
Right. The attorney clarified that the original resolution from the commission that created this committee set the quorum at 7 members out of 11 total.
Okay, 7 needed to be present. Then the big one, the voting threshold. How many votes to actually pass something?
This got interesting. The attorney pointed out a typo in the draft bylaws and clarified things. The original resolution was actually silent on the voting threshold.
Oh, so it wasn't predetermined.
Apparently not. So the attorney explained that standard procedure, like Robert's rules and Augusta's own rules, usually require a simple majority for a body this size. That means 6 votes.
So the recommendation was 7 for quorum, 6 to pass a motion.
Exactly. Then came the discussion about abstentions. When someone's there but doesn't vote yes or no.
Right. How does that work? Does it count as a no?
The attorney clarified. Typically, you abstain due to a conflict of interest. And based on local rules and even court decisions, it's not counted as a no. But, and this is crucial, you still need 6 affirmative yes votes to pass something. So if enough people abstain or are just absent, you might not hit that magic number of 6, and the motion fails anyway.
Gotcha. So abstaining doesn't kill a motion directly, but it doesn't help it pass either. You need those 6 solid yes votes.
Precisely. And this whole discussion about needing 6 votes immediately led into the first real debate.
Which was?
What should the voting threshold be for the really important stuff? Specifically for the recommendations this committee makes about changing the charter itself, the stuff that eventually goes to the state and the voters.
So maybe not just 6 votes for everything.
That was the question raised by Angela Bacchus. She brought up the city charter itself, which requires a 2/3 vote of the commission to actually change the charter.
Okay, 2/3 for the commission to finalize a change.
Right, and she did the math for this 11-member committee, arguing 2/3 would be 8 votes. Her point was, if their recommendations require 8 votes to pass the committee, it shows stronger consensus and might make them more likely to survive the whole process, legislature, voters, everything.
So she's arguing for a higher bar, 8 votes, specifically for charter change recommendations, mirroring the final approval process.
Essentially, yes, to give those recommendations more weight.
How did the attorney respond to that?
Attorney Plunkett drew a distinction. He said the 2/3 rule in the charter applies to the commission making the final change. He saw this committee as a recommending body, so the standard 6-vote majority should apply.
But he acknowledged the committee could choose a higher threshold if they wanted.
Yes, he agreed they had the power to set their own rules. And he also confirmed that mathematically, 8 is 2/3 of 11.
So Bacchus pushed back.
She did. She emphasized, look, we can change the bylaws right now. And our recommendations are proposing changes that ultimately go to the state and voters. So 8 votes make sense for those specific weighty recommendations.
What did others think? Was there support for this higher threshold?
Mr. Coleman chimed in, expressing concern about confusion. He felt having 2 different thresholds, 6 for routine stuff, 8 for recommendations, would be hard for the public to follow. He favored sticking to the commission's simpler pattern.
Keep it simple, one rule for everything.
Right. And Lonnie Wimberly and Steve Fushak also argued for sticking with 6 votes for recommendations.
What was their reasoning?
They emphasized that the committee is only recommending. These ideas still have multiple hurdles. The commission sees them, the local delegation, the state legislature, then the voters. Mr. Wimberly was particularly worried that an 8-vote requirement would basically paralyze the committee, making it almost impossible to agree on any recommendations.
A practical concern needing to actually get work done.
Exactly. So this led to a formal motion. Ms. Bacchus moved. 6 votes for regular business, 8 votes for charter recommendations going to the General Assembly. It got a second.
Okay. The dual threshold proposed formally.
But then a substitute motion came from Mr. Fuchek, seconded by Mr. Pearson.
What did the substitute motion propose?
Simple. Requires 6 votes to recommend changes to the charter. Basically 6 votes for everything. A straight, simple majority.
So a direct counter to the 8-vote idea. They vote on the substitute motion first, right?
Correct. The vote was on the substitute motion, requiring 6 votes for recommendations.
And the results?
It carried 7-3.
So the 6-vote threshold won out.
Yes. By passing the substitute motion, the original motion for 8 votes automatically failed. So the committee decided 6 votes are needed for all their actions, including recommendations.
That's a pretty significant decision early on, setting the bar for their work.
Definitely. And later, they took a final vote to just formally adopt the bylaws as they had worked through them, including the 6-vote rule, and that passed unanimously.
Okay, so bylaws largely settled. Was there anything else added?
Yes, actually. Another interesting rule came up during the bylaw discussion, proposed by Mr. Coleman.
What was that?
He moved to add a bylaw requiring all electronic phone devices to be turned off during the actual sessions.
Turned off completely. Why?
His reasoning was interesting. He wanted to prevent members from potentially getting guidance or, input from former politicians or commissioners during the meeting to ensure the committee's deliberations were independent.
Ensuring focus and preventing outside influence in real time. Was there debate on that?
Just a brief clarification on whether it should be a bylaw or maybe just a procedural rule, which might be easier to change later. But they decided to vote on it as a bylaw addition.
And how did that vote go?
It carried 8-2.
So that's now officially in their bylaws. Phones off during meetings.
Yep. Okay, moving on from their internal rules, the conversation shifted to how this committee interacts with other bodies and the public.
Right, the process. Who gets their final report? Who can actually change it? Important stuff.
The attorney read directly from the resolution that created the committee to clarify this. Copies of the final report go far and wide.
Right.
The local legislative delegation, governor, lieutenant governor, speaker of the House, relevant state committee chairs. And it's made public record.
And then what happens to the proposed changes themselves?
Those get submitted to our local legislative delegation. The delegation then decides whether to introduce them as legislation in the Georgia General Assembly.
And if the General Assembly passes them?
Then it comes back here to the citizens of Augusta Richmond County for final approval in a referendum, a vote.
Okay, so committee recommends, delegation proposes, legislature approves, voters decide. That's the path.
Basically, yes. Though the resolution also mentioned that a report goes to the mayor and commission members before March 31st.
Ah, so the local commission does see it beforehand. Can they change it then? That seems to be a point of confusion.
It definitely caused some back and forth later, but the attorney's clarification based on the resolution was this. The commission gets the report primarily for information. They cannot formally amend the committee's report before it goes to the state delegation.
So they can't rewrite the recommendations.
According to the attorney's reading of the resolution, no. But they can certainly voice their opinions, support, opposition, suggested changes to the legislative delegation or state officials. They still have influence, just not direct amendment power over the committee's document at that stage.
Okay, that distinction is key. The commission is informed and can lobby, but the delegation and the state legislature are the ones who can actually make changes to what the committee proposes before it goes to voters.
Exactly. That seemed to be the crucial clarification.
Right, so process outline. What about the nuts and bolts? Like when and where are they actually going to meet?
Good question. They tackled scheduling and location next. The first idea floated was meeting every other Monday.
Sounds reasonable.
But then reality hit. Ms. Bonner, who handles the scheduling for the chambers, pointed out a major constraint.
What was that?
The main commission chamber where they were meeting is heavily booked on Mondays by other groups, planning commission, zoning board, etc. Thursdays were looking much more open.
Ah, logistics. So Monday was out. This led to a bigger discussion about where to meet, didn't it?
It did. Pros and cons for different spots. The chamber they were in has all the tech mics, streaming, cameras for public access, plus better security and more space.
But the downside?
Some felt it wasn't conducive to a truly collaborative, eyeball-to-eyeball discussion, a bit formal.
So what were the alternatives?
The Beasley Room came up.
Rose.
They could arrange tables for more face-to-face interaction. Cons. Big ones. No built-in streaming or microphone tech needed for official public meetings. Concerns about security protocols since there's no required check-in, and smaller capacity.
So better for conversation, worse for public access and security. Any other options?
A conference room was mentioned, possibly for less formal work sessions, maybe. It has some basic tech like a webcam, but again, limited capacity if the public turns out.
Decisions. What was the resolution?
The attorney actually made a practical suggestion. Why not meet in the main chamber for the first 2 or 3 meetings, see how many citizens actually attend, and then decide if moving somewhere else is feasible based on attendance, tech needs, security, etc. Ms. Bonner agreed.
Start where the tech works, assess the need later. Makes sense.
So, based on that, they moved towards setting the schedule first. Lonnie Wimberly made a substitute motion.
What did he propose?
Meet bi-weekly on Thursdays at 2 p.m., and for now, meet in this chamber, acknowledging the public meeting requirements.
Okay, Thursdays at 2. Was there discussion on the time?
Yes, a feeling that maybe earlier was better. 11:00 a.m. was suggested. Then they seemed to settle on 10 a.m.
So the motion was amended?
Yep. Substitute motion amended too. Bi-weekly Thursdays at 10 a.m. Dr. McCord, who maybe had a conflict with the later time, was okay with 10 a.m.
And the vote on that. Thursdays at 10 a.m.
Carried. 10-1. Only Mr. Powell voted no.
So, schedule locked in, bi-weekly Thursdays, 10 a.m., but the location.
They decided to table the location discussion. Put it off until the next meeting.
Why?
They need to talk to the marshal's office first. Marshal Rowan Lannon was actually there about security options and feasibility if they did want to use a place like the Beasley Room for these official public meetings.
Right, check on security before making a final call on location. Sensible.
Okay, another critical piece of setting up their process: public participation. How will citizens have their say?
Super important for a charter review. This came up during the bylaw discussion too, right? Section 2, citizen participation.
Exactly. Someone recalled a previous informal chat where maybe 4 public hearings had been suggested, perhaps tied to different sections of the charter they'd review.
And where would these hearings be held?
Ideas included spreading them out geographically. Places like Diamond Lakes, Warren Road, the Beasley Center were mentioned as possibilities.
The key point seemed to be when to hold them, though.
Absolutely. Strong agreement that these formal public hearings needed to happen before the committee took final votes on their recommendations.
Yeah.
The feedback needed to be timely to actually influence the outcome.
Makes perfect sense. Hear from the public, then decide.
So the discussion became about setting a requirement in the bylaws. Should they mandate a specific number of hearings?
The consensus seemed to be, let's set a minimum number, but allow the committee the flexibility to hold more if needed.
Right. So Angela Bacchus made a motion for a minimum of 3 public hearings. It got a second.
3 is the baseline. Any debate on that number?
A little bit. Someone mentioned Athens-Clarke County as an example of a place that holds many more public meetings, arguing for broader representation. But it was quickly clarified this motion just sets the floor at 3. They can always add more later.
So the vote on requiring a minimum of 3 public hearings.
Carried 10-1. Again, Mr. Powell voting no.
Okay, so at least 3 formal public hearings are baked into the plan. What about public comment at their regular meetings?
Good point. That came up too, possibly under Section 4 or 5 Bravo of the bylaws draft. The thinking was this is probably more a procedural rule than a fixed bylaw.
So how people can speak during their normal biweekly meetings.
Exactly. The suggestion was to draft specific rules, probably mirroring what the Augusta Commission does, maybe a 3 or 5 minute time limit per speaker, a sign-up sheet beforehand.
And who is tasked with drafting those rules?
The request was for Ms. Bonner, the newly elected Vice Chair Ms. Barnhill-Turley, and Secretary Ms. Bacchus to meet with Attorney Plunkett and come back with proposed rules for the next meeting.
Okay, so public input mechanisms are starting to take shape. Minimum hearing set, process for regular comments underway.
Definitely. Now, another really significant part of this meeting was the presentation from the Carl Vinson Institute of Government, or CVI.
Ah, yes. Dr. Rex and Macy Lane Smith, they provide expertise to local governments, right? What did they cover?
It was really valuable context setting. They recapped the whole idea of consolidation in Georgia, different government structures like strong mayor, council manager.
And put Augusta in context.
Exactly. Pointed out Augusta-Richmond County is one of only 8 consolidated governments in the state, formed back in 95-96, and compared its size and population to places like Columbus, Macon-Bibb, Athens-Clarke.
So grounding the committee in how Augusta fits into the bigger picture.
Right. Then they defined what a charter is, essentially, the local government's constitution. It lays out the executive, legislative, judicial roles, powers, structure, all of it.
The foundational document.
Precisely. They walk through the key elements you typically find in a charter: incorporation, powers, administrative stuff like the clerk and attorney, courts, elections, finance, budgeting, taxes, borrowing, and other miscellaneous things.
They also talked about amending charters, didn't they? How important it is to review them.
Yeah, they stressed that charters need regular review. Some haven't been touched in decades. They used the example of finding outdated terms like chain gangs in old charters. It highlighted the need for modernization.
Wow, okay. What about the powers local governments actually get from the state constitution?
That was a big part of it. They explained home rule.
Which
Basically, the power for local governments to make their own decisions on local matters, but always within the limits set by state law and the Constitution. They also covered supplementary powers, zoning, eminent domain.
eminent domain, taking private property for public use with compensation.
Right, with just compensation.
Yeah.
Also, intergovernmental agreements like Augusta working with Blythe or Hephzibah and special districts for specific services.
But crucially, they also covered the limits on home rule, right? What local governments cannot do.
Yes, very important. A charter cannot change the fundamental form of government, mess with state election procedures, define crimes already covered by state law, impose unauthorized taxes, change court jurisdiction, or alter the school system.
State law is supreme. The charter has to fit within it.
Exactly. And CVI laid out at least 6 good reasons why a community should update its charter.
But
Modernization, like we mentioned. Mitigating legal risks as laws change. Compliance with new state or federal mandates. Protecting the process itself, ensuring it's thoughtful, improving public access and confidence, and addressing unique local issues specific to Augusta's history and needs.
So a compelling case for why this committee's work is important. What's CVI's role going forward?
They position themselves as a neutral resource, providing data, information, research to help the committee make informed choices. They'll work with the chair to structure the review process and supply whatever information is needed.
A valuable partner. And their presentation would be shared.
Yes, the PowerPoint was going to be emailed out and posted online for the committee and the public.
Good. Okay, so after the CVI presentation, what was next? Public comment time.
Yes, towards the end. They acknowledged former Commissioner Ben Hassan wanted to speak.
Okay, what were his main points?
Well, first, he directly addressed the committee's earlier decision on the voting threshold. He strongly disagreed with the 6-vote requirement for recommendations.
He favored the 8 votes.
Yes. He called charter review business of the highest order, defining how the government operates, and argued it demanded the higher threshold of 8 votes, referencing previous charter change efforts and the 2001 committee, which he said aimed for unanimity on contentious issues. He even hinted that politics influenced the shift back to 6 votes.
Strong words. What else?
He correctly restated the committee's role as recommending to the commission. But then he stated his understanding that the commission will weigh in and can reject, approve, or change those recommendations before they go to the state.
Ah, that point again. The commission's power over the recommendations. Did anyone react?
Yes, Ms. Bacchus jumped in, referencing the resolution again, saying it indicates the commission just gets a copy. It sparked that brief back and forth.
And the chair stepped in.
Yes, suggesting legal questions on that specific point should be directed to Attorney Plunkett for a definitive answer.
Sensible resolution there. Did Mr. Hassan have any other points?
He expressed appreciation that meeting agendas would be public. And he strongly supported the idea of allowing public input before the committee votes on major recommendations, saying something like, the more information makes you a better body.
So, support for transparency and timely public input.
Exactly. After Mr. Hassan, the meeting moved towards conclusion.
Final remarks from the new chair, Ms. Wilhelm.
Yes. She thanked everyone for their support, acknowledged the meeting maybe didn't go exactly as planned, but was productive. She urged the committee to take public input seriously.
Setting a tone for the work ahead.
Right. Expressed confidence they could work together despite covering some, as she put it, scary ground, and hoped they'd produce something to be proud of.
Any final housekeeping items?
Just a couple. A request for members to get official city email addresses set up for committee business, reminding them those communications are public record.
Good practice.
And a suggestion to share private mobile numbers among the committee for easier coordination, but with the important clarification that any committee business discussed on those private lines is also subject to open records requests.
Ah, the transparency rules apply regardless of the device. Important reminder.
Definitely. And then a motion to adjourn, which carried. End of meeting 2.
Okay, so a lot happened in that second meeting. Let's try to distill it. What does it all mean?
Well, this deep dive shows a committee getting right down to business, grappling immediately with fundamental questions about how it will operate and what its purpose is. Electing leaders wasn't just procedural, it showed different preferences and set the stage.
And that debate over the voting threshold, 6 votes versus 8, was clearly the centerpiece. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about philosophy. How much consensus is needed to propose changes to the city's foundational document?
Right. Opting for 6 votes potentially makes it easier to pass something, but does it carry the same weight or broad support as an 8-vote recommendation might have? That's the tension.
And the CVI presentation was crucial context, wasn't it? Reminding everyone of the history, the structure, the limits of what they can actually change under state law. It frames their entire task.
Absolutely. And establishing those public participation mechanisms, the minimum hearings, the process for regular meeting comments, signals an intent, at least early on, to engage the community.
So this meeting wasn't just about ticking boxes. It was about defining the rules of engagement, understanding the legal landscape, and starting to structure how they'll tackle this huge task while involving the public.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. That tension you mentioned between consensus and action, the 6 versus 8 vote debate is going to hang over this committee's work, isn't it?
For sure. Will requiring only 6 votes lead to more recommendations getting through, or will narrowly passed items face tougher scrutiny later? It sets a dynamic for their internal deliberations.
And here's a provocative thought to mull over. Knowing that the ultimate power doesn't rest solely with this committee, that the recommendations have to go through the legislative delegation, the state legislature, and then the voters. How does or should that reality influence the kinds of changes they even attempt to recommend?
That's a great question. Do they aim for bold changes that might face hurdles or focus on things with a clearer path to final approval? It's a strategic consideration layered on top of everything else.
You'll have to keep watching, keep listening as we continue to unpack these important discussions in future deep dives.